Let me ask you something that almost nobody is asking out loud. Why is the Middle East on fire again, right now, at this exact moment in history? Not 10 years ago, not 20 years from now, right now. Is it just religious extremism, ancient tribal hatreds, the ambitions of rogue states? Or is it something hiding in plain sight? Something so enormous, so staggeringly obvious once you see it, that it feels embarrassing it took this long to notice. Let me show you a number. $37 trillion. That is the size of the US national debt as of right now in 2026. 37 trillion. To put that into perspective, if you started counting $1 per second the moment Jesus of Nazareth was born, you still wouldn't have reached 37 trillion today. You wouldn't even be halfway there. It would take you over 1 million years of continuous counting just to reach that number. And I'm going to argue, carefully, step by step, that this obscene accumulation of borrowed money is one of the most important keys to understanding what is happening in the Middle East. Not the only key, but the one almost nobody is talking about. Stick with me, because by the end of this, the Middle East is going to look very different to you. Let's start at the real beginning. What happens when a country spends more than it earns for a very, very long time? It borrows. And when it borrows enough, something strange happens. The debt stops being just a financial problem on a spreadsheet. It becomes a geopolitical necessity. Debt at this scale changes what a country can afford to do, and more importantly, what it cannot afford to stop doing. The US dollar is the world's reserve currency. In plain language, almost every country on Earth holds American dollars as the foundation of their financial system. When Japan buys oil from Saudi Arabia, they pay in dollars. When Brazil trades with South Korea, the transaction is settled in dollars. The dollar is the blood of the global economy. Now, why does this matter for American debt? Because as long as the world needs dollars to survive, there will always be an artificial demand for American debt. Central banks from Beijing to Berlin keep buying US Treasury bonds because they need a place to park those dollars. And as long as they keep buying, the US can keep printing, and it can keep borrowing. And as long as it can keep borrowing, it can keep spending billions on its military, its global bases, its allies, and its endless wars. Economists call this dollar hegemony or exorbitant privilege. The Americans' ability to borrow endlessly is inseparable from the world's obligation to use the dollar, and the world's obligation to use the dollar is inseparable from one thing above all else: oil. To truly understand right now, we have to look back 50 years. In the early 1970s, America was staring into an absolute abyss. The Vietnam War had drained its treasury, and inflation was skyrocketing. In 1971, President Nixon shocked the world by untethering the dollar from gold. Suddenly, the US dollar was backed by nothing but a promise. Its credibility was collapsing, and the global financial system was on the verge of fracturing. So, Washington struck one of the most consequential secret deals in modern history. In 1974, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger flew to Saudi Arabia. He sat down with the Saudi royal family and laid out an arrangement. The terms were simple, elegant, and brutal. The United States would guarantee the absolute security of the Saudi royals. American weapons, American intelligence, and American diplomatic cover would protect the regime from any threat, internal or external. In exchange, Saudi Arabia agreed to do two things. First, price all of its oil sales exclusively in US dollars. Second, take its massive surplus oil revenues, billions of dollars, and invest them right back into American treasury bonds. Think about what that did. The petrodollar system was born. The dollar was saved, not by gold, not by American factories, but by Saudi oil. From that moment on, every country that wanted to keep its lights on and its factories running had to buy dollars first to buy oil. The dollar became backed by global energy and by the raw military power required to keep that energy flowing. Do you see it now? The Middle East is not a peripheral concern for Washington. It is not just an idealistic mission to spread democracy. The Middle East is the engine room of American financial survival. Now let's fast forward to our current reality, because this is where the story gets genuinely frightening. Over the past 2 decades, the U.S. national debt didn't just grow, it exploded. In the year 2000, it was roughly $5.7 trillion. Today, it's $37 trillion. That's a 6-fold increase in just 25 years. The Congressional Budget Office projects that within the next decade, the interest payments alone on this debt will exceed what the U.S. spends on its entire military budget. Let that sink in. More money going to pay interest to bondholders than to the Army, Navy, Air Force, and intelligence agencies combined. That is an existential pressure. It is a mathematical trap. And existential pressure produces desperate behavior. So, what does a superpower do when its currency's credibility depends entirely on oil being priced in dollars, but its debt is spiraling out of control? It does everything in its power to ensure that no rival power, no alternative currency, and no competing financial system is allowed to gain a foothold in the energy capital of the world. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's cold, hard structural analysis. Look at the modern history of the region through this lens, and the fog of war clears instantly. In the year 2000, Saddam Hussein announced that Iraq would begin pricing its oil in euros instead of dollars. In 2003, the U.S. invaded Iraq under justifications of weapons of mass destruction that turned out to be completely false. But look at what happened within weeks of Baghdad falling. One of the very first acts of the coalition authority was to switch Iraqi oil sales right back to US dollars. Look at Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. Before his sudden overthrow in 2011, he was actively lobbying for a pan-African gold-backed currency, the gold dinar, explicitly designed to trade African oil and bypass the dollar. Private leaked emails from Hillary Clinton's server later revealed that French intelligence viewed this gold dinar as a massive, direct threat to Western financial dominance. Gaddafi was overthrown. The gold dinar never happened. Libyan oil is still sold in dollars today. But today, in 2026, the situation has become dramatically more complex and far more dangerous for Washington. The tools that worked in 2003 and 2011 are no longer enough because the shift away from the dollar, de-dollarization, is accelerating at a pace we have never seen before. China and Russia are now trading massive amounts of oil and gas in yuan and rubles. India is purchasing Russian oil using rupees and dirhams. East Asian nations are increasingly bypassing the dollar entirely in major bilateral trade deals. The BRICS alliance, which has expanded to include major Middle Eastern players, is actively making an alternative reserve currency a formal institutional priority. Reserve currencies don't collapse overnight. They erode slowly, then all at once. It's like Hemingway's famous line about how a man goes bankrupt, gradually, then suddenly. And here is the hidden math. Every single percentage point of de-dollarization forces U.S. interest rates higher, adding hundreds of billions of dollars to that $37 trillion mountain of debt. The Middle East sits right at the valve of this geopolitical pressure cooker, and Saudi Arabia, the very linchpin of the 1974 petrodollar system, is now visibly, openly hedging its bets. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has cultivated deep economic and strategic ties to Beijing and Moscow. Saudi Arabia has openly stated they are open to trading in currencies other than the dollar. Why? Because they have read the ledger. They see a Western superpower with $37 trillion in debt, a weaponized financial system, and a deeply dysfunctional political framework, and they are diversifying for their own survival. Then there is Iran. Decades of heavy Western sanctions didn't destroy Iran. Instead, it forced Iran to pioneer alternative parallel financial networks, trading heavily in local currencies with China, Russia, and India. Iran's alignment with Beijing and Moscow isn't just about anti-Western ideology, it's about a shared material existential interest in loosening the dollar's grip on global trade. Now I want to raise a possibility that I find genuinely unsettling. What if the chronic instability we see in the Middle East today is not just the tragic result of failed states, local rivalries, or ancient hatreds? What if some of it is actively shaped, or at least tolerated, by these very financial pressures? When the petrodollar system is under stress, a dominant global power has two choices. It can negotiate and share power in a multipolar world, or it can destabilize. If you keep the region in enough turmoil, no coherent, unified rival financial system can easily emerge. If the regional powers are constantly looking over their shoulders at immediate security threats, the Gulf monarchies remain deeply dependent on the American security umbrella, ensuring that the primary lines of energy security remain tied to Washington. Systems produce outcomes, and a global financial system anchored to a desperate $37 trillion debt has an enormous structural incentive towards Middle Eastern instability, because instability breeds dependency. But intellectual honesty demands that we push back on this argument too. The United States is not the only actor on this chessboard, and the dollar story doesn't explain every single bullet fired or drone launched. Russia has centuries-old strategic interests in warm-water Mediterranean ports. China has an insatiable need for raw energy security to feed its industrial engine. Iran has its own ancient vision of regional leadership, just as Turkey, Israel, and the Gulf states have their own distinct competing agendas. The Middle East is a region of proud, ancient civilizations, not just a blank chessboard for empires to play games on. What I am arguing for today is not reductionism, it's addition. I am asking you to add this invisible financial layer to your understanding of the evening news. The $37 trillion debt is not going away. Washington has absolutely no political will or capacity to reduce it. As that debt grows by the day, the pressure to protect the petrodollar foundation intensifies. Simultaneously, the global push towards a multipolar financial world is an unstoppable train. The collision between these two massive tectonic forces has to play out somewhere, and that somewhere, historically and geographically, is the Middle East. Not because the land is cursed, but because the Middle East is where the energy is where the money is, and that money is where the desperation lies. If you want to understand why American presidents who win elections promising to leave the Middle East always inevitably get dragged back in, stop listening to the political speeches. Look at the ledger. The debt is not just a spreadsheet number. It's a physical weight, and the Middle East is where that weight comes to rest. I hope this changes how you look at the world tomorrow.